Matt, we really need to introduce ourselves because we have a lot of things to talk about and cover today.
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, we were pushing back the show because of a couple things that gone on in our personal lives. But you know what? We had a lot of breaking news in the NFL. We had some breaking news in baseball. Just so much going on, and I think this is the perfect time to also set up for conference championship weekend.
We'll start with next head coaches of each team. We'll start with the Chicago Bears. Ben Johnson is now the new head coach of the Chicago Bears. And we talked about the Bears getting an offensive-minded head coach, and they did so. And this really benefits Caleb Williams.
It absolutely does. I feel like the Bears, like I've said on this program, have got to get an offensive-minded coach. They did that. Ben Johnson not only is a leader of men, he also runs a great offensive scheme. And not only that, he's staying within the NFC North confines. So he was the OC in Detroit, but now he's going to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. He'll play the Lions twice. So it's going to be interesting how those encounters go. But so far, at first glance, he got the hero's welcome in Chicago.
He did. I mean, I think obviously it was their first choice. And I think that the Vikings will be kind of ahead of them in some sorts, but watch out for the Bears, though.
I think the Bears are definitely going to make some sort of improvement next season. I mean, this past season, they were absolutely horrible. Matt Eberflus did a bad job managing it. Obviously, the team was broken after the Hail Mary game against the Commanders, but I think the thing with Ben Johnson compared to Matt Eberflus is Matt Eberflus is a defensive-minded guy, and he didn't focus so much on the offense, but that was the Bears' biggest problem last year. They couldn't score a touchdown even if they tried. So I think you need to have a balance of both. And I think Ben Johnson can do that.
And then you also talk about the New York Jets hiring former defensive back Aaron Glenn to be the team's next head coach. And I'll tell you, this is a good pick for the Jets. I mean, a guy that was a former player, a guy that really knows the expectations of Woody Johnson. And I think that he is going to be part of this massive rebuild of the New York Jets.
And this is classic New York Jets. They go with a former player. They go with somebody who is a defensive-minded coach. He was the DC back in Detroit. He had some really memorable moments as a player, but the Jets love defensive-minded coaches. Even if the offense is not made out to be the best in the NFL, their defensive unit is always top 10 in most cases. And that's what the Jets want. They want to have a great defense every year, and they want to have a steady offense. So this was the pick that they had to make. I feel like there was no better option.
But the question now is for the New York Jets is Aaron Rodgers going to return? And I just you know what? He should retire now that there's a new regime in getting green.
Well, the thing with Aaron Rodgers is that he doesn't like to be a part of a rebuild. Aaron Rodgers, over the course of his life, you never know what the guy's thinking. He's just very unorthodox with his mindset. But he has said he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild, and I would be shocked if he wants to come back another year. But as far as the Jets are concerned with their offense, if Rodgers retires, you'd have to go back to the drawing board and maybe get a quarterback. But the class this year is so bad, I don't know who the Jets can turn to.
Probably not Sam Darnold again.
No.
Or Kirk Cousins.
Maybe Kirk.
But looking at the other breaking news for the Jets, they also hired Broncos assistant GM Darren Moogie as their new general manager. And now they have their head coach and their general manager in place.
Well, Darren Moogie's got a tough act to follow. I know that Joe Douglas didn't last a long time, but if you looked at Joe Douglas's draft picks, he had a lot of hits with the draft. So I think Darren Moogie has got to draft well. If Aaron Rodgers decides to retire, I think your number one priority has to be take a quarterback. And then also build up that offensive line and also make sure that a pass rush exists. Because one of the problems for the Jets last year was a pass rush that was blank, non-existent.
Well, the Jets defense was good with and then Jeff Ulbrich took over as the interim head coach. Things went south with Jeff Ulbrich.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head. I think that Jeff Ulbrich clearly was not the guy. I don't know why the Jets fired Robert Saleh anyway. But the good news is for Robert Saleh, pivoting to him a little bit, he is expected to get a coaching job somewhere, which is a positive.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's go to the AFC South here. And the Jacksonville Jaguars hired Liam Cohen to be their next head coach. I mean, a good offensive mind. He did such a good job with Baker. I have a good feeling that he's going to do a great job with Trevor Lawrence.
And again, another positive pick from an organization. I feel like Liam Cohen was the best offensive coordinator besides Ben Johnson in the NFL this year that's up for a head coaching job. Baker Mayfield had, I think, one of the best seasons of his career statistically under Liam Cohen. And it's funny because, yes, he's staying in the state of Florida but going to another quarterback. Trevor Lawrence has had his positive moments, but he's derailed quickly over the last 2 years. I want to see Liam Cohen bring the Trevor Lawrence we all know and love back. And I think this is the right time to do it.
I thought Peterson would do it, but Liam Cohen, a young mind, definitely does that. I also felt like that the Jets should bring in for offensive coordinator. They should consider Byron Leftwich as offensive coordinator.
Well, Byron Leftwich is a really good offensive mind. I mean, that's a guy who's been around for a very long time in the coaching ranks, former quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a guy who knows the ins and outs of offensive football. So he's always a possibility.
Well, staying in the AFC South here, the Texans have fired offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick. He was considered a head coaching candidate just a year ago, but it looks like DeMeco Ryans wants a different direction.
Now, that's actually very surprising. I didn't expect that. I thought Bobby Slowick, like you said, was a perfect offensive mind and offensive coordinator for a bunch of teams. And he was going to be a head coaching candidate somewhere. But I think the fact that this is brought up, I don't know what's next for him. Maybe the Saints, but then again, I'm not 100% sure what happens with him. This is a very shocking development. I mean, Bobby Slowick took C.J. Stroud to new heights. And the fact that he was let go.
I still think C.J. Stroud is a great quarterback, and I still think he's going to be an MVP candidate year in and year out.
Oh, absolutely. I think that you're right. I think C.J. Stroud is great, but Bobby Slowick developed Stroud into the person he is today. And the fact that he's gone is just shocking. I think the Chiefs game may have had something to do with it, but either way, this is very, very surprising. I thought Bobby Slowick would be the OC for a couple more years.
Well, going to Vegas, the Las Vegas Raiders have made a home hire, according to Mark Davis, because Mark Davis likes those big name head coaches, and he picked Pete Carroll to be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. It'll be a 3-year deal with an option for a 4th-year deal, like you said. I mean, my thoughts on this is that this is the Mark Davis show with hiring Pete Carroll. Now you have 4 proven head coaches in the division heading into 25, such as Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, and Sean Payton.
It's a very interesting hire, but it's also an unnecessary hire. I understand the Raiders like to make the big splash, but this is typical Las Vegas Raiders. Pete Carroll is 73 years old. I mean, I don't know if he has the energy to coach a football team. I was even shocked that he tried out for the Chicago Bears job, and that didn't go through, obviously. But I think if you're the Raiders, you need a massive roster reconstruction. You need to fix the quarterback position. I mentioned off air, maybe getting Sam Darnold as their starting QB could be an option. Defense needs absolute improvement. They need a general manager as well. So the Raiders have a lot of things to do, but if this is their first step, I think it's a good first step.
Yes, I think this is a good first step for Pete Carroll, but I also think that the Raiders, they're still stuck even with Pete Carroll at the helm.
Yeah, because the AFC West is so stacked. I mean, you got Bo Nix and Sean Payton in Denver. They're looking like they're going to be on an upward trend. You got Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh on the Chargers. They look like they're going to be a team to reckon with for years to come. And then, obviously, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid rule the AFC, period. So the Raiders are going to be in a little bit of a transition period. But like I said, I wasn't too thrilled about Pete Carroll, but at the same time, I understood this is the Mark Davis way.
Yes, he tried it with John Gruden. Obviously, the email thing did not work.
Yep.
And then you also talk about Josh McDaniels,
Oh yeah.
and that was south. That was a good time for the Raiders.
Uh-huh.
Antonio Pierce, I thought he was going to be good, and I think he's a great guy. But at the same time, Mark Davis was like, "I want someone big."
And I think getting the interim tag removed for Antonio Pierce didn't work. I mean, his first full season with the Raiders did not go as planned. I heard you mention that they might bring Rich Bisaccia back in some way, shape, or form, which I think would be a nice way to go.
Well, I think Pete Carroll's probably going to bring in some of his Seattle. Like I'm predicting, offensive coordinator should be Darrell Bevel.
Yeah, Darrell Bevel. I mean, he was the OC for Seattle during the years that they won the Super Bowl in 2013. He kept things simple for Russell Wilson, who was only a second-year QB at the time. So I think there's absolutely some foundation that Pete Carroll can lay for his coaching staff, but he's got to make it work. And obviously, the Raiders got a lot of work to do in general. The
And
best I
then
can see them being is a wild card team.
Defensive coordinator, I have three possibilities: Gus Bradley and Clint Hurt. But I think defensive coordinator should be Gus Bradley.
Hey, I know you mentioned Gus Bradley when he got canned. You were very surprised because you thought he'd still be employed by now. But Gus Bradley is a very good defensive mind. I think Max Crosby would work well with him. And I think management would try to find a way to build around Max Crosby to make that defensive unit strong.
And then Ken Norton Jr., I'm not sure if he should unite with him with Carroll in a way as a position coach or something like that. Because I have a feeling Pete Carroll probably will bring his Seattle people.
And you mentioned Ken Norton Jr. to me off the air. He's currently the linebackers coach in Washington, and Washington's going to play in the NFC Championship game on Sunday, which we'll get into in a little bit. Ken Norton Jr. has a way of knowing defensive schemes and coverages with linebackers. The Raiders don't have a lot of good personnel on the defensive side, so this is where the building a culture has to come in for Pete Carroll.
But the question is, I'm predicting Sam Darnold will be his quarterback.
And I'm thinking Sam Darnold deserves a chance to be a starter somewhere else. I mean, he did really well in Minnesota for the most part. Obviously, those last two games were not going as planned. But I think Sam Darnold has earned the chance to be a starter. And if it's not going to be a backup role in Minnesota, I think the Raiders are the only place I can see him going to.
All right. So, anyways, now the only position left in the coaching cycle is the New Orleans Saints.
Yes.
And I don't know who wants this job, quite honestly, but I have a feeling that the Saints will remove the interim tag off of Darren Rizzi.
Well, I think that's the only thing you can do at this point because we talked about the Cowboys job. Technically, they're left, but we both think that Brian Schottenheimer is going to take the reins as the next head coach in Dallas. That hasn't really been confirmed yet, but that's what it's looking like it's going to be. Darren Rizzi, I thought, had a strong showing as an interim head coach after they fired Dennis Allen. I can see him getting that. But one thing I also mentioned before we came on was that all the candidates that the Saints hired got coaching jobs. So I feel like there's only one logical option at this point, and that's bring Darren Rizzi in as the full head coach and remove the interim tag.
Yeah, I mean, so far out of the coaching cycle, my favorite hire is obviously Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, you mentioned Mike Vrabel. You were excited about him because he's going to your Patriots. I think it was a really good hire. I mean, Mike Vrabel sat on the couch for a year waiting to come back to coaching, and I'm glad that he found a team that could benefit from his knowledge as a head coach. Obviously, Jerron Mayo didn't work as well as you'd hope, but I think Mike Vrabel is more experienced, better with the media, knows how to run an offense, and can build a defensive culture as well.
Anyways, now with that being said, here, let's recap divisional round weekend. We'll start with Texans Chiefs. I mean, I wanted Houston to win, but Kansas City just had all the right buttons to win this football game.
Yeah, Houston did not play well at all. I felt like a lot of the plays that the Texans were calling, they even tried to go for on fourth down on a couple of occasions, and it blew up in their face. That's probably one of the reasons why they fired Bobby Slowick. But you got to play a better offensive game than that if you're the Houston Texans. I mean, one touchdown scored in a 23-14 loss. And the worst part is the Chiefs didn't play explosive amount of offense as well. They only scored 23 points. And I think the worst part for me watching this game was post-game, a lot of people were complaining about, are the referees on the Chiefs' side? And honest to God, this has been a story that we've been dealing with for years. But
it was like the same thing during the Patriots dynasty about if the refs were on the Patriots side.
Yeah, but I think that this whole referee nonsense has gotten out of control. Even the referees stated that we are very neutral with who we're rooting for. We don't like, why do we have to bring the referees into this? I thought the fact that was brought into our attention was, I think, absolutely unprofessional. And the Texans should know better than that. And I think that this is as far as they're going to go because the AFC West is just the dominant division. And unfortunately, the Texans are just not there yet. They had a good season, but they knew that this was a tall task and they couldn't handle it.
I know that they couldn't handle it, but now that's going to be a topic heading into the AFC Championship game. But talk about the Lions losing because they got outplayed and the defensive injuries finally got to them. And Washington took advantage of that.
Oh, my God. People in Detroit are probably mourning to this day about losing to the Commanders the way they did. But I think you made a good point. It's that the injuries on the defensive side, it was just too much to overcome. Jaden Daniels looked absolutely spectacular. Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions offense called a bunch of explosive plays, but they just could not keep up with the track race that was the Washington Commanders. And, 45-31 your result. The only thing I have to say for Detroit is you lost both your coordinators now. And while, yeah, you're still a good team on paper, you still need Mark Brunell to possibly be your OC. DC, I don't know what you're going to do. But the Lions, this was tough because they felt like this was their year, but it wasn't meant to be.
Yes, it wasn't their year, like you said. But you know what? I think even though that the Lions lost both their coordinators, they are still stating the course.
They're still a great team. Like, I have no doubt this team's going to be good. They're going to be playoff bound for the next year, but they're not going to be a 15-win football team like they were this past season. Like, they completely overachieved this year. And like I said, Ben Johnson was part of that culture. Aaron Glenn was part of that culture. I think the injuries on the defensive side of the ball finally caught up to them. And then Jane Daniels, who looked calm, cool, and collected the entire game, had arguably his best game as a pro and took the Commanders to the NFC title game. Would you believe it?
Oh, yeah. Yes. But talk about the two snowball games between the Rams and the Eagles, Ravens and the Bills. I mean, for the Eagles, I mean, credit their defense for making the last stop in this win.
I mean, listen, this was a game that got very slippery and slidey early on, or later in the game. I think by the third quarter, snow started to come down. Saquon Barkley is just an absolute machine. He's just been dominant all season long. He had two 60-yard touchdown runs, but like you said, the Eagles made the stands on defense when they needed to. They almost gave up the game-winning touchdown, but thankfully the defensive pass rush stayed the course. The Rams had a good game, but they just fell short.
Talk about the Vic Fangio effect.
Yeah, Vic Fangio dialed up a lot of blitzes, a lot of good coverage schemes for that Eagles defense. I felt like the defense did what they had to do. I just feel like the Rams at this point now, while they have two explosive receivers, it wasn't going to work in the snow.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to work in the snow at all. But anyways, now with that being said, the Ravens and Bills. I mean, you talk about another snowball game. Mark Andrews made the drop of his life at the end of that, when the Ravens were trying to go for 2 here.
This was very, very heartbreaking for Mark Andrews because Andrews had a really good season this year. I felt like the worst part of it is Mark Andrews hasn't gone out for interviews or press conferences since dropping the ball that could have tied the game. And the final score, by the way, was 27-25. Ravens tried to go for 2, and then they missed it. That's where the Andrews drop came in. Listen, both teams did better than I thought they would in the snow. I know Buffalo was going to be fine because they live for playing in the snow. Baltimore navigated better than I thought they would, which is always a positive sign. But the most unfortunate thing, like I said, for Mark Andrews is, yeah, he got like thousands of dollars donated to his charity thanks to Bills fans. But that's a consolation for a bigger thing. You could have sent the game into overtime had you just caught the ball, and he didn't. And I think that's going to hurt him for a little bit. I think that's going to sting him.
I think it will sting him, but you know what? Baltimore should be more motivated for them to make another run next year. I mean, this is a very good football team that they have with John Harbaugh.
And I think another thing that I forgot to mention was they didn't have Zay Flowers in none of the 2 playoff games they played in. Imagine if they had Zay Flowers. They probably would have been better off, and they probably would have beaten Buffalo, and it probably wouldn't have had to come down to that drop. But Buffalo, I thought, deserved this. They had a gritty win against the Ravens in the snow. They didn't take their foot off the gas. I feel like the Chiefs are going to be a tall task for them, but we've seen Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes before. That should be a classic.
We are in for a classic with that. It's like Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning, that's for sure.
Very similar.
So now in the NFC Championship game, that's going to start the day.
Yeah.
Washington and Philly going head to head. Really looking forward to this matchup between 2 running quarterbacks. And I think that we are going to be in for a treat in this one. I'm going to pick the Eagles to win this game. I think Jake Elliott kicks a 35-yarder to win it in overtime. And Eagles go to New Orleans for the Super Bowl.
I mean, you mentioned Jake Elliott. Jake Elliott has had a very bad postseason kicking extra points. So the fact that you mentioned him, I think, is actually very convenient, as a redemption arc for him. The Commanders are not going to go down without a fight. They're 6-point underdogs in this one, but I think they're going to stay in it. I think if Jane Daniels stays calm, cool, and collected the entire game, they're going to fight back, and they're going to fight back hard. I think they're going to make this competitive, but I agree with you. I think the Eagles win this game.
Well, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills are going head-to-head. I mean, talk about Patrick Mahomes being 3-0 in playoff games against Allen. And then you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs last year beating the Bills after a missed field goal by their backs. So, you know what? Going to play the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, picking the Chiefs. We're going to have Andy Reid Bowl.
See, I'm going to go against the grain. I got to pick the Buffalo Bills. I think this is Allen's year. I think he's going to win MVP this year. And I think this year will not come to an end in the AFC Championship game. We have never seen Josh Allen beat Mahomes in a conference championship game or a playoff game for that matter. And I think that comes to an end. I think Allen will finally get his win.
So for me, my Super Bowl is still the Andy Reid Bowl.
And I have Bills Eagles.
And you got Buffalo and Philadelphia because, here's the thing here. If it's Bills Eagles, I'm definitely going for the Eagles because you know that if another AFC East team aside from New England plays in the Super Bowl, then I would have to go for an NFC team that plays Buffalo.
And actually, I think it's funny that Buffalo has not won a Super Bowl, and their 0-4 win, their 4 losses in the Super Bowl come to NFC East teams.
So and are you saying that the Chiefs three-peat chances end?
So, I think the Chiefs three-peat will be denied. Denied.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, singing the anthem on Sunday is Gerald Wilson. And Gerald Wilson always brings luck to the Chiefs. And and the Chiefs are undefeated when Gerald Wilson performs the national anthem.
Well, all streaks got to come to an end.
So I'm definitely looking forward to him performing the national anthem on Sunday.
Hey, listen, I think he'll do a great job, but I think the Bills still win.
Oh man, I mean, the Chiefs. I mean, even if the Chiefs' three-peat chances get denied, they'll still be a Super Bowl contender.
Oh, absolutely. I just think that we've never seen a three-peat in NFL history before. And I think that even though the Chiefs are poised to do it, I think that we need a fresh face to stand atop the NFL. While Mahomes has been dominant, I just want to see someone else because I can't stand seeing Mahomes, Kelsey, and Taylor Swift at the top of the mountain.
Because Taylor Swift, brings them luck. And I think she's always been the Kansas City Chiefs' good luck charm.
Yep, she has.
So, anyways, we have some baseball stuff to talk about here a lot. I mean, obviously the Dodgers got Tanner Scott. Very excited about Roki Sasaki because I think those really improve our pitching depth. And also, Anthony Santander is a Toronto Blue Jay. And I really like this move for the Blue Jays because he probably is going to help the lineup. And I think this will convince Bo Bichette and Vladdy Jr. to stay in Toronto.
This is the one move that the Toronto Blue Jays made that they actually were able to convert on. The Blue Jays this offseason had been very active on trying to land somebody. They missed out on Ohtani. They missed out on a couple big-time free agents. But here, they actually were able to get somebody. And Anthony Santander is a good ball player. I think that even though Anthony Santander is not a major difference maker, I do believe that he's still going to convince Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. that at least the Blue Jays are making an effort to compete.
Yes, I mean they are making an effort to compete there. That's for sure. But you also talk about the Dodgers getting Sasaki and Tanner Scott. Do you think the Dodgers are right now the evil empire in baseball?
It's funny because that's all people keep saying. That they are the evil empire. And they got Kirby Yates, by the way. That's another name that you forgot to mention. Like Yates, Scott, Sasaki. I mean, look at this pitching depth the Dodgers have on both relievers and starting pitchers. They got so many arms that they can use. And it's funny. I think the main thing that helped them out, and you're going to hear about this all day long, the Ohtani deferrals helped out immensely with this. If they didn't defer Ohtani's contract, they would never have been able to get those guys.
And I think Ohtani did the thing when he became a Dodger, deferring the contract.
And I think the main thing with Ohtani when he deferred the contract was he didn't care. He just wanted to win. I don't think he cares how much money he makes. I think if they're winning World Series titles, who cares how much you make? That's why all these mini contracts that the Dodgers are giving to Tanner Scott, to Blake Snell, to Kirby Yates, to Sasaki, all these guys, it doesn't matter how much they make because they know they're going to be part of a dynasty.
Yes, I think so too. And I think you're to see it on the field this season.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers, if they don't break the Seattle Mariners 116-win record this upcoming season, I'll be very surprised. That's
they probably won't. They probably won't do it because they want to win a World Series. That's all.
I understand that, but when you have a team this good, what else can you say?
Let's talk about Pete Alonso for a minute. Do you think he still stays with the Mets, or do you think he goes somewhere else?
I heard that the Angels are trying to get him, and I would be very shocked if they do. I don't think Pete Alonso wants to go to LA, meaning Anaheim. I think that he's fine going to the Mets. I'm surprised it's taken this long for Steve Cohen to come up with a contract for him. That's kind of surprising.
I think, if Pete Alonso goes elsewhere, I think you got to move forward with Mark Vientos at first, and he probably will be a Rookie of the Year favorite.
Yeah, no, Mark Vientos had some good stuff to show last year. Even during the playoffs, Mark Vientos was really good. But Pete Alonso, I remember looking at the market for him in the offseason. His market was very bad. A lot of teams didn't really want to take a chance on him. And it was just kind of surprising because this is a guy who, at one point in his career, was the best slugger in baseball. But times have changed, I guess, and Alonso's kind of stuck. Like I said, I think he goes back to the Mets, but I'm surprised that he didn't get a better market than I thought he would.
Yeah, I didn't think he got a better market, like you said. But at the same time, my thinking heading into this is that if Pete Alonso goes to the Blue Jays, I'm thinking that Vlad Guerrero Jr. might move to third base again.
That's a possibility. I mean, the Mets, the Blue Jays haven't had production at third base for most of last season. Their third base batting average and on-field percentage was very, very bad. And if you want to keep Vladdy in the infield, put Pete Alonso at first. That wouldn't be a terrible idea. I mean, the Blue Jays can be creative with this. It just depends on how much the Mets want Pete Alonso back.
That thing we gotta keep an eye on him. But now that we got to talk about this, Jurickson Profar is now an Atlanta Brave. That's a great move for the Braves. But as for the Padres, I feel like that they haven't spent because of the ownership dispute.
I was very shocked when I saw the contract signing. I think that Jurickson Profar has become one of the up-and-coming hitters in baseball. And the fact that the Padres lost him, I thought was a real shocker. The Braves are coming out of nowhere making a signing like that. I mean, that was a guy that they were hoping to get. They got him for cheap, too. They got him for $14 million a year. So I very much think the Braves are going to be back in the AL East or NL East consideration for 2025. And when we make our division predictions on a future episode, that's going to be like a factor. Because now the Phillies, the Braves, and the Mets are going to be contenders in that division.
They will. And then Washington's, I don't think they're there yet.
Washington's not there yet, and then the Marlins are.
Like, the Marlins are just eh.
They're bad. They're really, really bad.
And, I mean, the Miami Marlins are just, they're nowhere to be reckoned with,
And the problem is that ballpark that they got is absolutely stunning, and no one goes to their games.
It's because it's so hot and humid down there.
Yeah, because it's Miami, but still the ballpark is amazing.
I mean, now what's next for the New York Yankees? Do you think that you guys are good now?
Am I good?
Is there another move in New York Yankees?
I would like a second baseman. I know that at one point we were in the running to maybe get a trade for Luis Ariz, but that fell through. I would love a second baseman because right now Gleyber Torres is gone, and we have no role at second base right now, unless we decide to move Oswald Peraza to second. That's the only thing I could see. But the Yankees, after making the moves that they made, they've kind of stalled a little bit. I would love a second baseman, but that's all I can see right now.
Yeah, right. I mean, you think that they get a second baseman, but I feel like Josh Chisholm should probably move back there.
I mean, Josh Chisholm can move back there, but then at third, who'd you put there? DJ? I mean, that's the only thing I can say.
Yeah, I'd go DJ LeMahieu. I think DJ LeMahieu could have a bounce back season.
I mean, last year DJ was horrible for the most part last year. I mean, if this is his one chance to bounce back, then I can see it. But yeah, you're right. Josh Chisholm is a natural second baseman, so I understand what you're trying to say. DJ, I think DJ might be the way to go at third. Like, if you can't get a second baseman, put DJ at third, put Jazz at second. That's the only way I can see it. Unless you decide to put Oswald Peraza at second.
Just go DJ third, and then second base would be Jazz Chisholm.
True.
And then Cody Bellinger, obviously, in center. and then you got Goldie at first.
Yep. Goldie's at
And then
first for 1 year.
And then talk about Alex Bregman. I mean, the Detroit Tigers look like they're going to get him. Do you foregone conclusion that Alex Bregman is a Detroit Tiger?
That would actually be a massive pickup. I mean, the Astros were content on trying to keep him, but Bregman wanted to explore his options in free agency. He thought Detroit was a real contender. And it's funny because the Detroit Tigers were the team that knocked out the Astros in the playoffs this past season. Bregman still has a lot to offer as a player. I think Detroit's a good environment. I don't know if he's necessarily going to win a championship there, but the Tigers do have a good foundation.
Yes, the Tigers definitely do have a good foundation for Alex Bregman, but I think that will probably be the factor for why I think he signed there.
Yeah, and plus AJ Hinch is the manager over there, so there's the ties of the Houston Astros from champions past are going to be over there. My thing is, can the Tigers continue to make the climb that they made last year? Last year they made the playoffs and no one expected that. Then they gave the Guardians a run for their money.
Maybe. That could definitely happen. But now that being said here, we'll talk about college football. The championship game. I did not want Ohio State to win, but this win basically silenced all the critics of Ryan Day.
Yeah, Ryan Day, I thought. Well, the game started off strong for Notre Dame. Their first possession, they killed 10 minutes of clock, and then Ohio State just bombarded them with points. It was 34-7 at one point, or 31-7. Then Notre Dame stormed back, and then one big play to Jeremiah Smith ended Notre Dame's hopes. But you mentioned it before, Ryan Day was under heavy scrutiny and heavy fire before the playoffs even began because of the loss to Michigan, and now here we are. And Notre Dame had a great effort. They lost their defensive coordinator, Al Golden, to the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think Ohio State got the championship they needed. The first team to win the 14 format, the first team to win the 12-team format.
Forgot to talk about here the Tennessee Titans that they hired Mike Bergazzi as the new general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs. The new general manager of the Tennessee Titans. He came from the Kansas City Chiefs, though.
Yes, he did. Mike Bergazzi is an executive from the Chiefs who haven't been part of the team for the last few years. He was groomed by Brett Veach, who's the current general manager for Kansas City. So I think he wanted to take his talents to Tennessee. They have the number one pick in the draft, so I want to see how Mike Bergazzi attacks this.
Do you think Joe Douglas should general manager somewhere in this cycle?
Maybe the Raiders, because the Raiders have a lot of work to do, and I think they need to go back to the drawing board in a big way. And Joe Douglas has made a lot of great moves during his tenure as general manager for the Jets, and I'd be very surprised if the Vegas Raiders pass on him. Plus, they know him for making big splashes. Why not make a splash like that?
I forgot to ask you that because I think Joe Douglas would be a grand slam hire for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, it would. And plus, you got Brady as part owner there, and Brady would want to make a splash. So why not hire Joe Douglas as your GM?
Now we'll talk about some NBA. Are you excited for when you see the Spurs play in Paris?
Oh, my goodness. First off, Victor Wembanyama in year 2 has been an absolute cheat code. I mean, this is a guy who – it's like cheating when you're playing against the Spurs sometimes. The Spurs, I think, are a very, very entertaining team. And Victor Wembanyama has been the reason for that. I think the Spurs might make the play-in tournament. I think the West is too stacked for them to get into the top 6. But I'm very impressed with how this team is playing.
Well, we'll see about that. But, we also have to talk about Jimmy Butler's drama in Miami. What are your thoughts on the Jimmy Butler saga that's still going on in Miami?
Well, first off, I think the Miami Heat are holding Jimmy Butler hostage. He's pleaded with ownership to let him go. Pat Riley refuses to do so, and they suspended him for 7 games, and they brought him back, and now he's suspended for 2 games. But the end of the saga may be near because This happened a couple days ago. The Utah Jazz have traded away 3 first-round picks to the Phoenix Suns for for cash considerations. So now the Phoenix Suns have 3 first-round draft picks that they could use and play with to try and acquire Jimmy Butler. I don't know what the Miami Heat are willing to give up for to get Jimmy Butler. Maybe they get rid of Bradley Beal, they trade him to Miami, and then they get Jimmy Butler to go to Phoenix. There's a lot up in the air, but I think if you're Jimmy Butler, you want to get out of Miami in any way, shape, or form. And I know that Miami's championship window is closed.
Just build around, if you're the Miami Heat, build around Bam Adebayo and build around Tyler Hill.
Yeah, I agree. I think that holding Jimmy Butler hostage and not meeting his demands is just criminal. I think the Miami Heat know that they got a problem on their hands, and they're killing his reputation unnecessarily. Because remember, the NBA have fought against Jimmy Butler's suspensions because they don't think it's right. So if you're the NBA and you're the Phoenix Suns, I'd make the move. The Suns are desperate to make a trade move anyway.
Yeah, and they're desperate, to make, the Phoenix Suns, I think, are desperate to still win. They have a talented roster that could still go all the way. I think Mike Budenholzer, I think, is the right coach for them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Like, they got Devin Booker. They got Kevin Durant. Imagine adding Jimmy Butler to that team. Whoo! That'd be something. So I think if you're Phoenix, you got the draft picks for a reason. I don't know why you just hold on to them without doing something with them. Plus, if you trade Jimmy Butler to the Phoenix Suns, you'd probably get 3 first-round draft picks that you could use to build a future around Bam, around Tyler Hero. It would be a very, very smart thing to do. And right now, I think Miami, there's no other way to go but up from here. If you don't want Jimmy Butler, you got to pivot.
Oh yeah, I feel like I think he should grow up and just man up.
Yeah, well, Jimmy Butler is not going to grow up and man up in Miami. He's made it perfectly clear that he doesn't want to stay there anymore. Ownership and coaching staff have not treated him the way he deserves to be treated. They suspended him unnecessarily, and I think the only way out is through trade. But that's been the story of the deadline.
That has been all that. But in baseball, there's MSN.com, but MLB owners could eye 26 lockout over Dodgers spending spree. And I'm like, you know what? That would be ridiculous.
I'm going to be honest. I kind of saw this coming because the Dodgers are spending money that they probably don't have. I mentioned the Ohtani deferrals. While it's a good strategy in theory, this might implement the idea. I'm not saying it's permanent, but this might implement the idea of a possible salary cap.
And I don't really like the salary cap idea in baseball.
Well, I mean, I understand why you think it's ridiculous because the Dodgers are profiting off of the Ohtani deferrals. But if you're deferring $680 million and everyone else is spending nickels of that, of their own money that they don't have, that they already have, that makes the Dodgers feel superior to everyone else financially. And I think that's right.
Yeah, I don't see a lockout coming in after the 26th season.
Well, a lockout shouldn't happen, but I think they need to make some changes to how teams proceed financially in free agency. And I think that salary cap's the way to go. I think if there were a lockout to happen after the 26th season, that would be detrimental to the sport because we don't want that again.
No, we don't want what happened in 22 because, Rob Manfred really – I don't think Rob Manfred wants to live through that again.
Oh, no. Like, we almost lost baseball entirely for a whole season because of him.
So that's why I'm thinking there's probably not going to be one.
I wouldn't think there's going to be a lockout, but as far as changes to the financial aspect of Major League Baseball, I feel like that could be coming.
Yeah, I mean, I still that teams can still sign players to 10 or 12-year contracts.
But no one else is doing the deferral method except the Dodgers. That's where everything is coming into fruition about a salary cap.
Like, here's the thing. The thing is, the owners will propose a cap, and the players, I know they're not going to agree to it.
Yeah, but like, isn't it kind of a fair thing to do with a salary cap? Because teams are already complaining about one team doing something that no one else is doing.
This is tough, you know?
It is, but like, I feel like the Dodgers acquiring some of all these people through one person's deferral.
No, the Dodgers are already a good team, and the Ohtani deferrals is definitely helping.
Well, it's helping them, but probably more. It's helping them more than they probably should be benefiting off of this, because now 29 other organizations are complaining about, you know, 680 million that should be on the table. Like, one thing that I will credit the Mets for is that when they offered Juan Soto 765 million, they paid him up front. They didn't wait to hold back. They didn't defer any of his contract. So why are the Dodgers deferring $680 million of Ohtani's money?
I think it's because it creates more roster flexibility for the Dodgers.
But like, that's what's strange though. So if one team can pay a $765 million salary and one team's paying 20 of a $700 million salary, how does that make it
And
right?
people already complain about that. That the Dodgers spending all this money or building a super team is bad for baseball.
It kind of is bad for baseball because, you know, I'll put it this way. When the Yankees won their titles and they had the three-peat in the late 90s, early 2000s, they weren't deferring any money. They weren't doing this.
Well, if you look at it for the Yankees, they didn't trade their farm during the Derek Jeter era.
That's what, like, they didn't trade their farm. They built around their farm. But when they acquired guys like CC Sabathia, when they acquired Nick Swisher, they didn't defer any contracts. Nothing was deferred. They guaranteed the money.
They also had to get rid of bad contracts too.
Yeah, but like, almost all the contracts the Yankees signed during their heyday were not bad contracts. Maybe Alex Rodriguez, but at least they got something out of him. This is something that I've never seen in my life, with a deferral of that much money paid to one guy who's guaranteed $700 million, but is deferred that money because he wants to win titles. Yeah, it just sounds weird to me.
Yeah, it does. I forgot to tell you who the Spurs play in Indiana. That is in Paris. It's against the Indiana Pacers.
That's right.
And I think San Antonio should win that for Victor Wembanyama.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because that's his home country. That's his home country.
So anyways, here, I think this was a great show, and we'll have more to talk about in the coming week. So we won't do a show next week because of the Pro Bowl thing and all that. We'll do a show the week before. I mean, after the week before the Super Bowl.
Sounds good to me.
Anyways, we'll talk in a few weeks for this.
Take care, everybody.